Many years ago, I met my first king. I was young, ambitious, and completely ignorant. As I walked past the office of the CEO, I heard him summoning me to come inside. His office felt sterile, and I saw the old man sitting behind a small empty desk. He was 78, founder of the company, and had difficulty to let go. Every morning he came in at 6:30 to work until 1 to finish his day with a simple lunch with his wife in the cafeteria. He was holding a large tender in his hand and was waving it furiously at me. "Is this yours?" I heard him say, and I nodded anxiously. Next thing I knew, he had thrown the tender over his desk and was stamping his feet on top of it. "This is bad, bad, bad!" Later on in my career, I ended up in human resources. I started to notice more striking resemblances between theater and organizations. What I had learned on stage as an avid amateur actor could be applied in modern organizations as well. Every organization is a theater, and every employee is an actor. Think of the dramas after the review process has taken place or when the promotions have been awarded. The fight for power in the executive room, the gossip at the coffee machine, and the secret romances after the Friday afternoon drinks. It is all comedy and it's all drama and has a lot in common with the great plays my hero Shakespeare wrote. And his ideas about leadership, about culture, about male-female relationships, and about communication are still reflected in modern-day organizations. The plays of Shakespeare are not about the past, but they are about the here and now and everything that is about to happen. The emotions his characters exhibit in his plays are still reflected in modern organizations and are easy to recognize. Ambition, deception, love, trust, desire. So people can learn by reading Shakespeare about their organization because they have so much in common. Powerful families are mighty organizations. The king is the CEO, counts and chancellors the management team, and the serf is the employee of today. I believe that organizations can get a competitive advantage by learning from this great storyteller. And everybody in this room knows the power of story. That's why you're all here. Storytelling is part of human nature and one of the fundamental ways that human beings learn. And a great story has the potential to bring complex patterns and relationships alive. So, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Each have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his life plays many parts. This raises an important question. How can you know what is exactly going on in your organization if everyone, leader, manager, employee, is an actor? You can't. And that's what makes organizations and the people in it so interesting and so irresistible. It is impossible to comprehend. And the reason for that is quite simple. You all have a role to play depending on the needs that you have to satisfy. And that could be your own personal needs, the needs of your boss, of a colleague, of the organization itself. And given that a role is defined as a set of expectations of a certain position, you can either be convincing in your role or not. However, in a lot of organizations, a role is defined as with a central idea, and that idea is that anyone in a certain position behaves similarly to anyone else who could be in that position. But that's not what is happening. Employees do not behave always in a socially acceptable or desirable way. So, in order to make that happen, you have to find a way to deal with that certain role conflict. So let's take an example. Othello, the fearsome man from Africa, who was given the role by Shakespeare of general in the lily-white environment of Venice. Now, usually organizations tend to hire people that make an easy fit in that organization, with whom colleagues can easily get along. But sometimes it's also good to hire someone where the fit is not that obvious. Without friction, there's no shine. So Othello, after becoming a legend in his own country, gets the opportunity to shine in Venice. And by appointing him, the rulers in that city take a chance that eventually ended very badly. Because Othello literally doesn't know how to survive in that organization. The poor man was in a role conflict the moment he left his boat and set foot on San Marco Square. First off, it was totally unclear to him what the needs of the organization were. Secondly, he messed up some promotions, the needs of his colleagues, and got the wrong people mad. Othello failed to comprehend the importance of informal relationships in Italy. To make matters worse, he decided also to fulfill a personal need, and he married the daughter of his boss, 25 years younger than him. So all of this obviously tarnished his reputation, and whereas in a modern organization Othello would have been fired, in a great Shakespearean tragedy he obviously dies. Come to think of it, everyone dies in a Shakespeare tragedy, but that's a different story. Othello will not be the first nor the last man whose end is determined by his relationship with a woman. Now, in Shakespeare plays you don't have a lot of leading female characters, but they do play a very important role. Sometimes strong-willed, sometimes envious, and sometimes plain ruthless, like Lady Macbeth. The woman who wants to see her man on the throne more than anything else, and who's willing to spill blood, a lot of blood in her castle to make that happen. Now, Lady Macbeth is one of the few strong female characters in a Shakespeare play. And in order to give her credibility as a woman who is stronger than her man, and bear in mind this is the 17th century, Shakespeare uses a technique called unsexing. And by unsexing Lady Macbeth, he gives her male attributes to enhance her credibility. Take, for example, this line when she's ready to do some killing. "Come, you spirits that assist murderous thoughts, and make me less like a woman and more like a man, and fill me from head to toe with deadly cruelty." And what about the men in this play? What about Macbeth himself? Is he also unsexed by the great writer? Yes, he is, because it works both ways. And Macbeth knows and realizes that men, just like women, will change identity, and that he too will not be able to escape from that. And while Lady Macbeth gains power throughout the play, Macbeth's masculinity and integrity is increasingly questioned. And with that, he changes identity from pitbull to poodle, as it were. And with that, he's also additionally vulnerable to the humiliating insults of his wife. "I have the same hands like yours, they're as red as yours, but I would be ashamed to wear a heart so weak and pale." Now, in the 21st century, fortunately, unsexing is increasingly unnecessary. But what you do see is that prejudice and diversity go hand in hand. And in a play that can be funny or exciting, but in modern day organization, that's outright stupid. And I remember working in Italy with Gianni. And Gianni is your archetypal Italian man, the man who had absolutely no scruples whatsoever to entertain his mistresses in his office, or on his desk for that matter. The man who didn't even realize he had no women in his team, but was nevertheless very much willing to do so. As he said to me, "Hey, Weimer, I know exactly what you mean. Every team needs a mama, and the man cannot be the mama, so I will get a mama for my team." Not exactly how I planned it to go, but at least the office was moving in the right direction. Now, Gianni would not have liked Lady Macbeth, not in his office and not in his bed, but Gianni had difficulty with diversity anyway. And consequently, the office was filled with like-minded lookalikes. And it led to a very boring environment. Because imagine a play where everybody plays the same character and looks the same too. Wouldn't that be incredibly boring? So diversity is comprehensive. It is about everything we see, but also everything we do not see. Your gender, your sexual background, cultural background, and your sexual orientation, pardon me, only tell a little bit about who you are. The real power of diversity is in what we do not see, in the different roles people are able to play. And that brings me to Mavericks. And I love Mavericks because they are the unconventional people in your organization. A little bit rebellious. They are creative and are able to change the direction of an organization with their ideas and their energy. A quick quiz question. Does anyone know who John Scully is? John Scully. Anyone? Don't think so. John Scully, name sounds like a Shakespeare character, but he is not. He entered the history books as the man who fired Steve Jobs from Apple. Apple was doing relatively well at that point of time, and Steve Jobs, as we all know, was very much focused on product development. And some of the other priorities, most notably finance, were lost out of sight. Steve Jobs, in the eyes of the board of directors, was a difficult man to work with. They found it difficult to cope with his unpredictable and sometimes foolish behavior, and could not keep track with his creative ideas and the different roles that he plays. So they bring in Scully, a seasoned traditional manager used to playing only one role to fix things. And the first thing he does is fire Steve Jobs. And from that moment on, Apple slowly starts rotting. In the end, when Apple has hit rock bottom and Scully already disappeared in the coils, they bring back Steve Jobs. They buy the company he founded after his departure. And the man himself makes a triumphant return. And from those days date the famous words that he used, stay hungry, stay foolish. Steve Jobs was capable to be both king and fool. Now, if he was capable of being both king and fool, does that mean he wasn't authentic? What is authentic? You can think of words like genuine, reliable, or credible, but to me, authenticity has nothing to do with showing only one face. In different situations, you show different faces. Being authentic is a thin red line, usually connected to your own personal integrity. A little thread in your behavior. You never compromise the real you. Shakespeare's most famous character is also his most authentic one and most famous one, and that is Hamlet. Now, Hamlet is not doing well in this play, and you would not be doing well either if your uncle killed your father only to marry your mother 3 weeks later, if you're sent on a long trip with friends who betrayed you, and if you're hunted by a ghost at night, and that ghost tells Hamlet that indeed his uncle killed his father, and Hamlet vows to take revenge. But he doesn't know how to make a murderer. And Hamlet is a bit of a philosopher, finds it difficult to get into action, to be or not to be. You know it very well. So in the end, he decides to pretend he has gone insane to further investigate truth. Hamlet plays multiple roles, and that's what makes him so interesting. Because if someone only plays one role, our intuition tells us we already know everything there is to know about that person. They have been robbed of that one single unique quality that would make them more interesting and more productive, the capacity of self-inquiry, to reveal something unexpected, not only to us, but also to them. They cannot teach us anything surprising because essentially they're not able to surprise themselves anymore. And this is the real world equivalent of a manager coming out of a feedback session like, same feedback as I've heard before, and then says, I guess I am what I am. Shakespeare doesn't let us off the hook so easily. Shakespeare's characters have the capacity to overhear themselves talk and have the capacity to change. Shakespeare teaches us that we are not only who we say we are, but that we are made up of many unknown and conflicting parts. Now Hamlet, when he heard about his father's murder, discovers in soliloquies of stunning intensity that he cannot bear to remain as he is. So tortured is he by his inner conflicts that he considers in perhaps the most famous monologue ever written, the pros and cons of suicide. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take up arms against the troubles and by ending stop them. To die, to sleep, And with these words, I ask you to be appreciative and understanding about the different roles you all have to play and the people play around you. Don't force them to leave. Don't let them fall asleep, but appreciate every single unique personal offering they have for you. Because in the end, and after all, we all have a bit of Othello, Lady Macbeth, and Hamlet in us. Thank you.